Good morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual. Today is Saturday, November 29th, 2025. And Maxime Bernier is warning of a fiat collapse, and he points to a pattern that has been consistent for hundreds of years. These global reserve currencies fade as other currencies rise. And in that situation, we are in the end of the US dollar. And so what will rise next? I have no idea, but it seems like an interesting warning at an interesting time. No land acknowledgements in the Senate. Interesting, because what's happened in BC has had a legal bite and people are upset about that. And so that's having an impact on people's behavior. And that's notable for me. We've sent more money to Ukraine than any other country in the world, and the corruption is being exposed. I've got images of Chrystia Freeland sitting beside Zelensky's aide, who just resigned after his home and office were raided by the corruption office in Ukraine. And we've sent how much there? And there's a lot of smoke, and where there's smoke, there might be a fire of corruption, right? Oh, that would have been a good name for today's show. Oh well. Anyway, we'll see. Silver hits $58 an ounce. So yowza. I remember looking at it and seeing that it was like something like $25 or $30 an ounce at the post office. And I thought, I'll go buy some silver today, and we'll do some of that. And now it's flirting with $60. That's pretty wild. And what will that mean for electronics and phones and things like that? Because silver is a component used in these devices. So if it is now almost double what it was artificially held down because it's being used in production of these devices. So it's being held low. Do you know how they're making it low? They sell paper silver. So if you don't actually have the silver in your hand, and they sell more paper silver than they have actual silver mined, and you can catch up, kind of, sort of, right? But like, that's how they offset. I think. But it's not good, because if you own paper silver, you don't actually, like a stock of silver, you don't actually own the silver, and so it's one of those things, kind of risky. If you own the actual silver, if you have it stacked in your house somewhere, then that is actually gaining value. The 401 was closed for 10 hours. That's insane. They closed it for 10 hours just outside of like where I live. And I had no idea, one. And two, it's usual they'll back up the highway and like let people off. They just left them there. So, and I mean, it was snowy and stuff, but I've never seen them do that. It seems very, very odd. In Alberta, the annual general meeting for the UCP started on the weekend, right? And so yesterday's the beginning of the weekend, and so there was the beginning of the whole thing, and fireworks already. And Smith is savagely booed. They cut Rath's mic. So fireworks, holy smokeroni. So there's lots to get to. Let's get to it first. We have to start with the boo heard around the world, or at least around Canada, or at least in Canadian political circles, right? If this isn't a harbinger of what's to come, I don't know what is. But Scott says Danielle Smith gets booed at the UCP convention after mentioning working with Canada. Boo! Screw Canada. We're Alberta, they say. And my gosh, at this point, I don't even disagree with them. Where's the independence movement in Ontario? Honestly, at this point, we need to stop the bleeding, and the federal government is the biggest liability we've got. So here's Danielle Smith, and she's laughing, or is she crying at the end of this clip? Here we go.
As you know, I support a strong and sovereign Alberta within a united Canada. I know we might have a bit of a difference of opinion on that, but I hope people today feel a lot more confident that Canada works than they did a couple of days ago.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. So we're talking about booze. Yeah. I know. We heard the meeting table. We're like, wow. And we know this group is pretty against the idea of working with Canada, but that shows you how much.
Yeah, that does show you how much. That was a savage, prolonged boo. And Danielle Smith, I mean, they cut away from her quickly, but her face, there were people who were saying on Twitter, et cetera, on X, I guess, she looked rattled, and I don't disagree. She looked a little rattled. She looked like she could burst into tears at any moment. Here's Jeffrey Rath, and David says, and David Craden does the interview. It's 7 minutes almost long, and well worth listening to the whole thing, so you should go check it out. But I'll play you the first 2 minutes, I think. lots of really good points made by Rath, and then I'll tell you what happened at the meeting. They cut his mic. Because he was making too much sense, and then he yelled to the room, and the room responded, of course. Here's Jeffrey Rath.
So that she could save face at the annual general meeting that's starting today in Edmonton, right? What's going to be really interesting is to see, and I think there's going to be a real split in the crowd. I think everybody on our side of the fence isn't the least bit impressed with this pipeline deal. And then you're going to have, 20 or 30% of the crowd that are, that are supportive of it. So it's going to be a really interesting weekend. It's going to be really lively, and I've heard that, some of Alberta's billionaires that have Danielle on speed dial have literally hired influencers at $1,000 a person to try to work the crowds and get people to support Danielle's slate of candidates. And it's going to be an exciting weekend. I mean, there's lots of shenanigans going on, and all the big money, Alberta money that's up to their eyeballs in making sure that Danielle stays in their back pocket are doing everything they can to make sure that she continues to control the board of the of the UCP, and that the forces of Alberta freedom and Alberta independence are kept in their place, so that they can continue to call us a bunch of fringe radicals, as opposed to 70% of the UCP party base, right? So it's
you're in Edmonton right now. Are you going to be attending the?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I'm sitting. I'm actually, the lighting is a bit weird because I'm sitting in a hotel room in the Hotel Macdonald, overlooking the rapidly freezing North Saskatchewan River
Right.
as we speak. It's actually quite pretty today. We got some snow last night, and it's turning into winter in Edmonton. But yeah, I'm up for the AGM, and thousands of Alberta Prosperity Project's supporters are joining me at the AGM to vote in a slate of directors to tell Danielle that she's not the boss of us and that we don't buy what she's selling. So it's going to be an exciting weekend for sure.
So, but you think could the Premier lose control of her party this weekend?
I think she's already lost control of her party, and why do you think Danielle? Think about it. The board already split 50-50 on the issue of whether or not Danielle was going to allow any discussion of independence at the AGM. And what I say is the outgoing president of the UCP, Rob Smith, voted with Danielle to prohibit any discussion of independence at the AGM, and to prohibit any resolutions from hitting the floor dealing with Alberta independence at the UCP AGM, because they don't want it out in public that the UCP is now an independence party, right? So it's this. I think it's going to boil over this weekend, and I don't.
Is it going to boil over? Maybe, right? Maybe. Brendan says, when Jeffrey Rath got up to the mic in question line, he asked how many people in attendance were in favor of an independent Alberta. People applauded, roared, cheered, stood in agreement, and they shut off his mic when he also brought up the carbon tax reduction hoax. Jeffrey Rath says 600% increase in the carbon tax, $10 a BBL increase in the cost of production of oil, $50 billion in carbon, or $50 billion in carbon sucking and no pipeline until 2040. He said, NEP 2? NEP? I would say that's a hard no for me, dog. Corey says Rath now then ripped into the memorandum of understanding and shouted to the room, who supports an independent Alberta? The room broke into loud cheers and a standing ovation. The independence element is stronger in here than I ever imagined. Smith was uncharacteristically rattled, booed when saying she supports an independent Alberta and a united Canada, then made progress with the room when speaking of getting rid of the emissions cap and optimism for a pipeline. Well, the emissions cap is being gotten rid of. Fine, sure, great, woo. But if you're replacing it with a carbon tax that's 600% more increased or higher, that doesn't make any sense, right? That's crazy. Corey says, ended with applause from the room, but damn, the independence option can't be ignored. If there isn't a referendum scheduled to take the pressure off, I think this party risks a split. And so, yeah, it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see. Eric says 9 thoughts on what's going on around the Alberta pipeline and all the rest of the stuff related to that. I have to show you a Trump clip before we go for the free show, because it's absolutely hilarious. So don't let me forget. 9 thoughts. Jeffrey Rath is a hero for speaking truth to power. Cutting his microphone might be the Canadian equivalent of the Soviet moment. It is apparent that Danielle Smith is looking at the CPC leadership, and Pierre Poilievre is floundering. Her chief of staff, Rob Anderson, sees blood in the water. Her actions over the last 6 months make sense then. Seeing Eastern journalists on CBC rattled by the intensity of independence support made my month know it made my year. Contrary to, it's funny because when they cut from Smith to the reporter, he was supposed to be calm, but he looked more panicked than Smith looked. Smith looked like she was about to burst into tears, but the reporter just looked floored. He looked like, oh my gosh, like he looked like he'd been sideswiped. He had, I guess, no inclination that people were so supportive of an independent Alberta and so against what's just happened with Smith and Carney and the Memorandum of Understanding. Contrary to constant gaslighting by Canadian political, cultural, and media elites, the independence movement in Alberta is strong. I think it's important to give up on the Conservative Party of Canada. I've given up on the Conservative Party of Canada in 2018. Before that, it is federalist and will always listen to the needs of Ontario and Quebec over anywhere else. It's time to develop a bloc Alberta whose sole goal is to extract concessions for Alberta from decadent minority governments. If Danielle Smith does not jettison Rob Anderson and disavow federalism, she could even come out as neutral on the topic. There's a very good chance her premiership is over. The climate change scare is dead. America, China, India, and Russia are walking away from it. Let's not kill ourselves for Ottawa's delusional elites. Alberta must focus on building as large a pipeline as possible into Montana. That is the only way we'll increase our exports. This must be priority one. Alberta independence movement is going nowhere. That fact alone is heartening. We will gain more and more media coverage going forward. A referendum is winnable. Is going nowhere, meaning like they're not going nowhere, like they're not going to be effective. Going nowhere, like they're not going to go away. They're going to continue moving forward, and he says that a referendum is winnable. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure that was clear because I don't think it was clear in the way I said it. Paul Mitchell is responding to this whole thing. It's a little bit long, but I still think it's worth reading, so I'm going to. Paul says, the big picture problem with the Ottawa-Alberta Energy Memorandum of Understanding. Today, Alberta Premier Smith announced the much-anticipated Memorandum of Understanding between Ottawa and Alberta. She hailed it as a major breakthrough and even suggested it might cause Alberta separatists to once again embrace federalism. This logic is flawed because it misses out on many major reasons why Albertans would be much better off in an independent Alberta. To be certain, there are some beneficial elements to the agreement, and if followed through, would provide an economic benefit and rollback of some of the worst Trudeau-era policies that specifically harmed Alberta, but Alberta would need to agree to increase carbon taxes for decades to come, and no pipeline is likely to be to the BC coast until probably 2040. That's a generation away. In the meantime, Ottawa will continue to rob Albertans to the tune of $20 to $30 billion per year. This is the difference between what we pay in taxes and what comes back in federal transfers. Albertans will have little to no control over which policy or political party governs in Ottawa, since every federal election is decided before votes from Alberta are even counted. Ottawa will continue to use weaponized mass immigration to flood Alberta and permanently transform our demographics from mostly conservative small government Albertans to a globalist socialist majority of foreign-born imports who vote for and are dependent on big government. Globalist Ottawa will use taxes plundered from Albertans for giveaways to foreign countries and international organizations that work against our best interests. Albertan firearm owners will be subject to the whims of gun-hating, confiscatory, anti-freedom Ottawa. Ottawa can continue down its preferred path towards globalist authoritarianism with digital ID, central bank digital currencies, mass censorship, and big government control over all citizens, including Albertans. Ottawa can keep overspending until they cause an economic collapse, which will sink Alberta's ship along with the rest of Canada. Ottawa's bad relationship with America will cause continued trade blowups that will hurt Albertan jobs and also damage consumers. Alberta is forced to continue with the ridiculous and expensive ruse that life-giving and essential CO2 is some harmful pollutant that must be managed by intrusive government taxation and control. Ottawa will continue to use the fraudulently named equalization program to reward liberal-friendly jurisdictions, especially Quebec. All true. I'm reminded of a time when Neville Chamberlain, the United Kingdom's prime minister in the late 1930s, triumphantly waved around a piece of paper, the Munich Agreement with Hitler, and proclaimed it would lead to peace in our time. The problem was, however, Hitler was evil and untrustworthy partner. Everything you know about the Second World War is wrong. We'll just jump ahead. I'm comparing Danielle Smith to Neville Chamberlain. I'm not comparing Danielle Smith to Neville Chamberlain, and I'm not saying her memorandum of understanding doesn't accomplish anything. It kind of doesn't, though. However, I am saying that Ottawa is an evil and untrustworthy partner. I'm further suggesting that Ottawa will eventually implode Canada and continue to harm Albertans in the ways described above. Albertans should realize that only through Alberta's full independence will we ever be rid of our perpetual Ottawa problem. Furthermore, it's precisely because Ottawa fears Albertan separatists that today's deal was accomplished. Ottawa cannot afford to have Alberta leave, since this would utterly collapse their power and control. At 100%. If Alberta leaves, the sitting government falls, because you can't lose a province and then say everything's fine, everybody. Nobody wants anything different. Obviously, everything's fine, because you just lost your golden goose. The golden goose packed up and moved to the United States. Okay? Like, they're gone and they want to leave. And so, yes, that's absolutely true. Okay? If Alberta leaves, the the government falls. I don't know. They still have control of the elections, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's interesting because the control of the elections is, I can't remember what I was going to say. I'll just continue reading this. I might remember. If Alberta does separate, it could free not only Albertans, but also Canadians from coast to coast who would be saved from the clutching talons of globalist Ottawa. After Alberta's separation, other provinces could follow suit and unshackle themselves from the federalist dumpster fire policies and prioritize the interests of their own people. Yeah, you wouldn't be able to say nothing's wrong after Alberta leaves, and other provinces would say, well, why are we even listening to you? Like, that doesn't make any sense. So, but again, they still have control of the elections, but if nobody believes the election outcome, then they lose more control, right? It just unwinds even further if they try. If after Alberta leaves, we go to an election and restore Carney to power, and he says, see, everything's fine, that's not going to fly, and people would further lose faith in the elections, is what I was trying to say, I think. Here is Mark Carney laughing at Danielle Smith, and he gets, at the end of the minute, he says, like, there won't be a pipeline if there's no partner, and I think there just won't be a pipeline. I could be wrong. They might force this pipeline again, because if they don't, they'll lose Alberta, and they really will. Alberta will just walk away, citing inability to get anything done ever, right? So, but still, here we go. I think it's going to be tied up in the courts for years. Here we go.
CBC, Prime Minister, are you willing to approve a pipeline even if British Columbia or affected First Nations don't agree? Would you compensate them instead?
Just to be clear, this agreement today between Alberta and the Government of Canada, it's the first step. It's an example of cooperative federalism. We're agreeing in partnership and in a spirit of trust. But what has to happen, several things have to happen before a pipeline is built. And one of those is a private sector proponent. Secondly, goes directly to your question, which is that there needs to be full partnership, including equity ownership, substantial economic benefits with First Nations in Alberta, First Nations in British Columbia, as well as agreement and substantial economic benefits for the people of British Columbia. So we look at this as the start of a process. We've created some of the necessary conditions for this to happen. But there's a lot more work to do, and very much in the spirit of partnership.
There aren't any private sector proponents. You mentioned them there.
Well, if there's not a private sector proponent, there won't be a pipeline.
So there you go. No private sector proponent, no pipeline. Yowza. Here's Elizabeth May, and I don't think we're going to listen to her ranting. I just wanted to point out that I said before, even when she was saying, I'm going to vote for this because, Carney seems to have a plan, I said she was going to put on a kabuki theater show and lose her mind on all sorts of interviews, and she's doing just that. So gov.exe says Elizabeth May is out screaming at the end of the world over the Alberta Memorandum of Understanding, saying it's outrageous, reckless attack on the climate. Elizabeth May is the new Jagmeet Singh, props up the Liberals, then bitches about how they betrayed her. They're all the new Jagmeet Singh. The Conservatives do the same thing. Andrew Scheer was hiding behind curtains in order to pass the budget. Jagmeet, and then on Twitter fighting with the Liberals, right? Jagmeet Singh did the same thing, right? I'm going to fight with the Liberals in public, but in private, support them in the House of Commons. Wild and crazy stuff. Blanchette says he doesn't want a pipeline, and he's just talking nonsense to underscore that he still believes, or publicly anyway, he still believes in the climate change hoax. And he says Mark Carney suspends the laws at the whims of his ministers and tramples over the body of British Columbia and the Indigenous peoples who do not want another oil pipeline. By his own signature on a formal and firm contract with Alberta without British Columbia. This is concerning, but now no one doubts it anymore. Yet Quebec's future is not in oil. Our wealth lies in clean energy, and our economic differences, forestry, aerospace, culture, agri-food, strategic minerals, aluminium. Canada is oil dependent. That's Mark Carney's business plan. He has instrumentalized the fear of Donald Trump. The only reason I'm showing you this is because apparently Yves Blanchette has Trump derangement syndrome. This is Donald Trump's fault too. How dare you influence Mark Carney to build a pipeline, Donald Trump, you evil person. Oh, okay, weird. That's some mental gymnastics there. Yet the shareholders of oil companies are mostly American, and Brookfield, so himself, after forcing the way through in British Columbia, will it be Quebec next? Let us be their voice in Ottawa to protect ourselves. So yes, let's advocate for them to protect ourselves. I came across this yesterday because I think I'm constantly trying to think of like, what's the solution here? How do we do this in a way that will actually yield a good outcome and not the end of chocolate cereal and the rest of society as we know it? And I think this is actually it. I think this is what you do. And it's just the model of breaking up a larger country into smaller countries and managing those smaller populations as a country and then increasing accountability. I'm not sold on the high taxes. I think high taxation is bad because fundamentally, in my experience in Canada anyway, the government is incapable of actually delivering anything meaningful, or things they deliver are corrupt or riddled with fraud or ideologically tied to ideological strings, things like that. And so I think getting the government out and allowing private to provide, maybe with incentives, something like tax incentives or something like that, but again, low taxation. I don't know exactly how to do it, but there's a way to incentivize building your community, building things for the public, while having the government be as small and hands-off as possible. I think there is. But here's what Switzerland does. Switzerland? I think it's Switzerland. And I think that this is fundamentally the answer. And then I'm going to show you what Trump said, and then I have to say goodbye to the stream. Squiggly hair Shanks. Yes, says, I live in the country where poverty is banned. In my 10 years in Switzerland, I've seen less than 5 homeless people. Once I ordered a new iPhone by mail. It didn't fit into the mailbox, so the mailman just put it on top of the box, and it was there all day until I saw it in the evening, and I grabbed it. The city I live in has so much tax money that they just built an artificial beach and an outdoor swimming pool for the public. Sounds normal, right? Well, they built the outdoor swimming pool 200 meters next to the other luxurious free swimming pool, the indoor one. So now we have 2 next to each other. That seems a little wasteful. Like, we could just have lower taxes. Why do you need 2 swimming pools? There's one. You want an outdoor one? All right, I guess. There are several reasons why Switzerland works well. One of them are the people. Swiss people are very diligent, detail-oriented, and conscientious. That's why all luxury watch brands are from Switzerland. No one else has the discipline to do this, especially 100 years ago. Another reason is extremely low immigration. Switzerland makes it very hard for you to immigrate. My foreign co-founder paid over $4 million in taxes to the country in 2022 alone and isn't even allowed to stay here unless he has a job. You need to live in the same district in the same city for 10 years to be allowed to apply for citizenship, and then the citizenship test is so hard anyone with sub 100 IQ would fail. Lastly, and I think this is the super important point, Switzerland is small, only 8 million people. It's much easier to manage a small country like that than it is to manage it's easier to manage a smaller company, and there are far less inefficiencies and money waste. That's why I also think that countries should divide themselves up into smaller areas of max 10 million people and completely govern themselves. Yeah, and then you can have accountability that's much nearer. Right now, we have multiple touch points of corrupt government, all the way from municipal, and like you can't get a meeting with municipal medical officers of health if you're saying, hey, there's a problem with the things that who did you ask about forcing school children to wear masks? What doctors, what family and children's services, who did you talk to? Nobody. You're not allowed to talk to these people. You're not allowed to talk to provincial ministers about radical gender ideology in schools. You're not allowed to talk to them about boys being encouraged at Centennial High School in Guelph, for example, to use the girls' bathroom. can't talk to them. You can't set a meeting. You can't do anything, right? And I've talked to the principal. I've talked to they want me to go talk to the principal of the school and then talk to the director of education in Upper Grand District School Board. And then I can have a conversation with the minister. But that misses the point. It's bad policy, and it's people who are running amok with Marxist ideology in schools. And we should be able to point this out to the ministers, right? And there are other examples where there's no accountability, there's no access to these people, right? And it's absolutely insane. So here's what I wanted to show you, and then I have to say goodbye. Oh my gosh, we've got Ukraine stuff to do. Oh my gosh, 25 minutes. Okay, this is Trump, and Trump's hilarious. And I actually thought midway through the second watch of this clip, is this real? Is this actually real? Or is this like I had to watch the mouth to make sure it was real? I think it's real. The crowd reaction seems genuine. I believe this to be real. And this is the funniest clip you'll see today. I promise you. Here's Trump threatening, saying, listen, illegals in America, get out while you still can. If you think things are bad now, it's going to get so much worse. So much worse. But I don't want to spoil it for you, so buckle up. It's funny. Here we go. Get your popcorn. This is fun, okay? Yeehaw!
It's pretty funny. Well, I think it's funny, at least. All the illegals, they still think we're stuck with them? No. You're about to be stuck in here with us. Clock is ticking. Could be a soft tick, could be a loud one, hard to say. A word of advice, though, I'd scram if I were you. Skedaddle. Vamoose, leave while you still can. Alligator Alcatraz is just the beginning. Next up is Shark Shawshank. Sharks, very dangerous, not the most reasonable of beasts. Some of you have seen the Discovery Channel and know what I'm talking about. Shark Week, very exciting. We'll live stream escape attempts, justice and economic stimulus in one. Rikers with grizzly bears is...
I don't know. I don't know, man. Maverick says, Trump, all the illegals, they still think we're stuck with them. No, you're about to be stuck in here with us. I don't know. I'm still wondering. And we have to do a bit of Ukraine. We have to do a bit of Ukraine stuff because the Ukraine stuff is absolutely unreal. Canada is kind of implicated because we've given a ton of money. David says, I was talking to an international investor who says the corruption in Ukraine is beyond belief. Theft and bribery are endemic, much worse than in Latin America. The oligarchs must be feasting on our 100 billion. Maybe that clip wasn't real. Chrystia Freeland says, it's been 1,370 days since President Zelensky told the world we are still here, and Canada has stood with Ukraine every day since. This is 2 days ago. This is November 26th, okay? On Tuesday, I had the honor of standing with President Zelensky once again in Kiev, and then I think that was the same day or maybe a day later, right? Or I guess it was yesterday. Tom Quiggin says, President Zelensky's chief of staff, Andrei Yarmark, has submitted his resignation following a raid by the Anti-Corruption Bureau. This is big news as Yarmark was seen as the wheeler dealer who kept the government, the oligarchs, the military, and foreign leaders or lenders all on the same page while facilitating massive corruption. The fallout will be huge. Yeah, and I hope that Canada is caught in the fallout because the fallout is like massive money laundering at a scale globally I don't think anybody's seen. Like, this is a big scandal and a whole bunch of governments are involved in it, right? Like, that's pretty wild. Wiretap Media says the office of the Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky is being raided by Ukraine's anti-corruption agency. The evidence was always there, but Canadian mainstream media refused to report it, and now the federal government has to answer to Canadians. I mean, are they going to answer to Canadians? I don't really think so. But they're talking about all of this corruption. Jasmine says Chrystia Freeland was just filmed sitting beside Andrei Yermak days before his home was raided in a corruption probe and he resigned. Canada has sent more money to Ukraine than any other country on earth, and this is who our reconstitution envoy is meeting with. Optics don't get much worse than this. Yeah, it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. M. Brandt says, I have some questions. He's responding. He says, this doesn't give me the warm and fuzzies. This is November 2nd. Canada will always stand firm with the people of Ukraine. Minister Jolie met with the head office of the president of Ukraine, Andrew Yermak. So Mel Jolie's meeting with these guys. Now they're jumping ship, right? Freeland's gone to Ukraine. So that seems like leaning into going back to the scene of the crime again, right? To make sure all the fingerprints and everything are rubbed clean. It just seems wild and crazy. And then here's Andrew Yermak had a phone conversation with Deputy Prime Minister Freeland on November 12th, 2021. So this corruption goes a long way back. What happens if your government has been stealing from you for years? What happens? How do you get paid back? What happens if the leader of the opposition has a blue and yellow bandana of Ukrainian, Slava Ukraine thing, and he's on the same stages as all these other people too? What happens then? How do you fix that? Because it seems like that's the situation we're in. Everybody's sold us out. Who's getting kickbacks, right? Melissa says, holy cow, Andrew Yermak really infiltrated the Liberal team in Canada, it seems, many such meetings, and now he's resigned in this Ukrainian corruption case. Every Canadian should be wondering where our $200 million is. Yeah, so there's Mel Joly and Mark Carney and Justin Trudeau, and I don't know who that one is. Natalie Drouin, and then Mel Joly and Mel Joly again, and then I don't know who the bottom one is. So that's a lot of corruption. Here's David. He says, if only there had been clues of widespread corruption in Ukraine and people are taking pictures of supercars driving through Ukraine, right? Like Porsches and Ferraris and all sorts of Audis, right? All sorts of corruption. And this is something Dmitry Medvedev, who's Russian defense minister, I think, says the corrupt government surrounding the expired Kiev clown has crumbled. He may still be sitting in the office spewing cocaine from his nose, but he won't be the one who signs the peace treaty. The buffoon is illegitimate. The collapse of his system is inevitable. So we're watching it, I think, in real time. But unfortunately, at the same time, we're watching the end of our U.S. dollar as the currency reserve for the world, and that could be problematic as well. And Maxime Bernier says, here's a thread about an 80-year-old pattern that points to imminent dollar collapse. History reveals an unforgiving pattern, one that has dismantled every single global reserve currency, not most, every single one. The Portuguese real dominated regionally Atlantic and Indian Ocean for about 80 years, then gradually devalued. The Dutch guilder reigned for about 80 years, then gradually declined. The British pound sterling ruled for about 105 years, then experienced a long decline against the dollar. Each reserve currency was dethroned by the same predictable sequence of 7 stages. The US dollar was crowned the world's reserve currency in 1944. That was 81 years ago. And right now, in 2025, the dollar is in the final precarious stages of the very same cycle. We are now witnessing stage 6. So what do we need to buy? Francs? Or should we buy francs? Everybody's buying francs? No? Bitcoin? I don't know about Bitcoin, man. XRP? I've heard XRP is the one people choose. And again, I'm not a money guy. Don't take this as monetary advice. I'm just saying this is what I hear on the internet. XRP is the choice for large companies and large, like if you're a bank and you have to reconcile 1 million transactions a day or something like that. XRP is fast because it can reconcile simultaneously onto the same ledger, I guess, where Bitcoin is slow and you line up, and it can take time. So if there's depending on the speed of the server of your when you reconcile, right? It doesn't really matter. The reconciliation is faster with XRP and very, very slow with Bitcoin because they have to line up and they can only do it one at a time. And each transaction is indeterminate. It could take 2 seconds.